So what we'll be discussing tonight is an ordinance for outdoor uses in certain commercial zoning districts within the zoning code. And just to give you a little bit of background, Planning and Zoning Commission discussed this in fall of last year. Really was a result of staff being proactive on some type of nuisance complaint. But they ended up reviewing the outdoor uses within certain commercial zones. Within the zoning code, you have certain limitations on uses under each zoning district, and certain commercial zones require all uses to be conducted wholly and entirely within enclosed buildings, but then they have a list that exempts out certain, allowable uses that are allowed to be outside. And so the commission had reviewed these back then and identified that there were a few that maybe should be added to the list of exemptions. The first one was really outdoor seating for restaurants, and they noticed that within the neighborhood business zone. They allow restaurants within that zone, but they specifically exclude outdoor seating areas for those restaurants, and the commission thought that that was a little strange to allow restaurants but not to allow any type of outdoor seating which may be adjacent to an arterial street like the neighborhood business is typically adjacent to, or landscaped residential areas where it's nice to be able to sit outside, maybe next to a park, areas of that nature. And then there was also some minor cleanup actions. Community garden, market garden, when we did that urban ag ordinance, ended up not including that on loose lists of exempted outdoor uses. And of course, with those gardening type uses, you're going to have some outdoor activity. And so we just thought we'd clean that up there and add that to the list. And then kind of changing the structure of the neighborhood business zone. It was a little bit different than other zones, and we added limitations on uses and said that all uses had to be conducted wholly and entirely within enclosed buildings, and then just added the outdoor restaurant seating, community garden, market garden, and then like loading areas for daycares and schools, uses of that nature. Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing on the ordinance, and that happened on May 13th of this year, and they recommended approval as presented. And staff's recommendation is to conduct a public hearing, and after considering any testimony, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have about this.
Questions from Mike? Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, I'm a little puzzled by the genesis of this. The way the staff report reads, it started from an outdoor concert in a motor business zone?
It was actually central business.
Central business zone. And Planning and Zoning was asked, in this it says, quote, to discuss the possibility of regulating more outdoor uses in commercial zones. That sounds to me like asked to look at being more restrictive.
Correct. Yeah, staff thought we'd be proactive and bringing this to Planning and Zoning Commission to see if they were interested in adding more.
In being more restrictive.
Being more restricted to some outdoor, maybe adding outdoor concert venues to the list of restricted outdoor activity.
Okay. But having worked through it, they ended up presenting what tonight appears to me being less restrictive in neighborhood business. Am I following things correctly?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Dan?
For Rod, being a former prosecutor, do you feel that the outdoor concerts, basically we were talking about on their property, can be limited enough by the current noise ordinance, and this really has no effect on that, but because they figured that the current noise ordinance took care of whatever complaints were happening and got that basically shut down?
That's my understanding how it's been working. The chief, I think he reported to that, that they haven't had any problems when they have noise complaints to go out there and shut down those problem areas, especially that concert that initiated this review. So I think our noise ordinance seems to work very well and has solved a lot of problems in this community.
Okay.
Other questions, John?
Not a question, more of just a point, is that planning and zoning, and with the help of the planning department, looked at the whole thing, and the first thing they came up with was that the ordinance that we have concerning noise and concerning outdoor outdoor concerts is plenty good enough to deal with the situation that we have. But as stated, as looking a little bit further into it, it did not cover all of the things that should have been covered or could have been covered within some of the other areas that we have. That's the reason that this particular document is in front of you, and that's also the reason that the planning and zoning came up with, actually the city staff came up and planning and zoning approved this change, so that we're just kind of cleaning up an issue, and at the same time saying that the noise issue that we have now, that the police chief, Rod, are working with, is adequate to the task. I think all it did was basically clean up some issues and make everything that we're doing a little bit more clear as far as the enforcement of the ordinance.
Okay, with that, thank you, Mike. I will open the public hearing. It's 7:48, and I would take approval from folks, disapproval from folks, or general comments from folks at this time.
Excited group out there tonight.
Well, I thought I'd just kind of group them together and give you just a smorgasbord of being able to come up and without I seen it. So I'll close the public hearing at 7:49. And Dan, this was brought in front of the admin as well on June 22nd.
Yeah, we basically just reviewed it knowing that it was coming to full council. And, even up till today, still, along with Walter, trying to figure out how we got here. And I think I'm picking up what they're putting down. We're trying to basically, it looks like, make all these business areas have the same allowable uses. We have seating in our central business district downtown along Main Street, outdoor seating for restaurants. So this is allowing it at those neighborhood business. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm seeing there. And I don't really see, I thought I saw something wrong with it, but I really don't now. But I think we can continue discussion.
Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, from staff standpoint, how do you view neighborhood business related to other commercial business zones?
Well,
Well, I presume it's done in the code, but what's the perception of
most
how it's supposed to operate? Where is it located? That
Yeah,
kind of.
most neighborhood business zones are located along collectors or arterials, so there is a high level of traffic activity adjacent to those zones. But it is serving as a buffer between those areas and residential areas. So it's intended to serve certain sectors of residential areas. So maybe the northeast corner of town, where you may have to travel greater distances to Safeway or West Pullman Road in order to get commercial services. Well, it's just intended for these pocket commercial activities that are intended to serve the adjacent neighborhood, is really the intent of the neighborhood business zone.
Walter?
And apparently staff feels that allowing certain outdoor uses adjacent to those neighborhoods will not be creating problems.
Well, they're going to be restaurants, and so, usually restaurants end up closing up at 9 or 10 a.m. It'd be similar to outdoor restaurant seating in other areas where you have it directly adjacent to residential zones and neighborhoods. It's usually small in scale. This is an example of Salt Lake City area. There's a park.
I was going to ask where that was in Moscow.
Yeah, right across the street. And so you have a kind of a, not really a major roadway, but probably a collector street there. They have a small outdoor seating area here. It's mainly indoors, but there is a small outdoor patio area, and this is a duplex over here. You have an adjacent residential neighborhood. You may have been to Hyde Park neighborhood in Boise. It's just these small scale, just the nature of the neighborhood business zone. You're not going to have a really large restaurant. They're usually going to be smaller in scale, and it would just be outdoor seating incidental to those restaurants, and these are just other examples, just small outdoor patios that aren't going to generate a whole lot of noise when they're adjacent to residential areas. Another example of Hyde Park area, you've got 2 restaurants with outdoor seating here, and then it transitions right into the residential area. And so, usually with the buffers that are required of our code, there is a quite substantial amount of landscaping between different zones, and anytime you have a commercial zone adjacent to a residential zone, you're going to have one of those type A, type B buffers, which are going to deaden the noise, and then just the inherent nature of restaurants are going to close 9 to 10 o'clock, and so we don't perceive it as being a detriment to the adjacent residential areas.
Thank you.
Art, you had a question.
Yeah, not really a question, just a comment that every time we pass one of these ordinances or resolutions, we got to know that your chances of getting it exactly right the first time out the gate are not great, and so we can always expect to have a few of these cleanups to go along to allow better implementation of what the intent of the original ordinance was all about, and I think this is a fine example of one of those.
Mike, along the same questions of outdoor seating for restaurants, what type of guidelines are in place to control the size of the outdoor seating? Is there a percentage of square footage pertaining to the business, or how is that? Supposing a small restaurant was sitting on a rather large lot and they had room to put in a very large outdoor seating, I mean, what controls that?
Well, we don't have any type of limitations in the code, but building code is going to dictate that. So depending upon the size of the space, the number of occupants, they may be restricted. If you look at the Anchor on Main, you'll notice that they have very few tables out there in the outdoor patio area. That could be a result of the occupancy classification of the building. And I believe in talking with the building code, there are, those limitations, but there isn't any within the zoning code about it can only be 40% of the restaurant size. There's just nothing.
Jim?
I think it's important to point out that the neighborhood business district does not allow bars. So if, that would be a concern that would be raised if you can have outdoor seating next to a residential area that might cause a noise issue if there was a bar in that situation, but we don't allow that. So that's probably something that should be out front here, that we're not allowing outdoor seating for a restaurant that's going to evolve into a noisy outdoor situation that you might see with a tavern or something like that.
Correct. It would just apply to restaurants.
Okay. Dan?
Well, with that, I would make a motion that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings that be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion by Dan and a second by Wayne to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it'll be read by title and published by summary. And this is on the proposed amendment of Title 4, Chapter 3 to allow additional outdoor uses within commercial zones. Walter, I'll start the roll with you.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
6-0, and we have another ordinance here. Ordinance number 2015-11. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 3, for the addition of certain outdoor uses within commercial zoning districts, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law.